Her life was a heady mix of escaping her mother's cage, secret gambling rings, shocking affairs, bitter family betrayals, and a deathbed confession so horrifying her husband never spoke of it again. Yet the phone in your hand, the AI that can write a song, it all started with notes she scrawled in the margins of lesser men's works. This is the story of Ada Lovelace, a 19th century countess. History calls her the world's first computer programmer. But history also leaves out the good parts. See, she was the daughter to Lord Byron, the poet, the womanizer, the seducer, a daughter who received nothing but his name and his scandalous reputation. Her mother gave her a rigid education in mathematics and a life under constant surveillance. She was told to fear her father's poetic madness. She was taught logic to keep it at bay. But Ada Lovelace did something no one expected. She fused them together. She called her method poetical science. And with it, she looked at a simple calculating machine and saw a world of art, music, and intelligence. She invented the future from it. This is the story of the pressure that creates a diamond and the escape from a gilded cage. Welcome to Her Story, where we tell the stories of women who quietly reshaped the world. Ada Lovelace, thanks for talking with me today.
I'm happy to be here.
So, your life kicked off right in the middle of a media firestorm. Let's talk about that. Let's start with your parents. It's such a wild contrast. Your father was Lord Byron, the original rock star poet. And he wasn't just famous for his poetry, was he? All passion, chaos, and scandal. And your mother, Annabella, was a brilliant mathematician, obsessed with logic and order. That's like fire and ice coming together.
That's the perfect way to put it. My father was a ghost story my mother told me. A cautionary tale I wasn't supposed to read. He was this force of nature, brilliant, passionate, magnetic, and utterly self-destructive. He represented unrestrained imagination, the kind that creates beautiful poetry and burns down everything around it. He was the wings.
Interesting. What about your mom?
My mother believed in a universe governed by rules, logic, morality, and mathematics. To her, my father's imagination wasn't a gift, it was a fire to be contained. She was the cage. A beautiful, intricate cage built of right angles and reason, designed to keep the wild bird of my father's spirit from ever taking flight in me.
So your mother saw imagination, kind of like a disease, as something to be cured. But you can't just suppress something like that, can you? Was that creative part of you still finding ways to get out, even as a little girl?
Always. Before, I was obsessed with flight. I was mapping imaginary lands with their own coordinates and creating coded languages with my governess. Then came flyology. It was my grandest project. My first attempt to build my own wings. I studied bird anatomy. I considered materials. It was my first taste of what I called poetical science, a way to engineer an escape from the cage.
But then that cage got even smaller. You got sick with measles, I heard, and you were paralyzed for almost 2 years? I can't even imagine.
It was the most profound cruelty. At that point, I felt like my mind was all I had left. It became my only landscape. I suppose, in a way, my mother got what she wanted. I was finally, truly contained. But she had no idea where my mind was about to go.
Fascinating. What happened next?
After 2 years of hell, I was finally able to get on with my life.
And I believe when you were 17, you dove headfirst into another kind of trouble. Tell me about that.
That, a classic teenage melodrama. I had an affair with my shorthand tutor. I even wrote my mother a letter declaring my independence. Basically, it said that she had no right to direct my life forever.
How did she take that?
She was horrified. To her, it just proved the Byron madness was finally breaking through. That affair was my first real taste of unsanctioned freedom. I think I took it a bit too far.
Didn't you try to run away and marry him?
Yes. It was a grand theatrical plan. We were going to elope. I probably imagined us living in a cottage, subsisting on forbidden poetry and bad arithmetic. It was utterly ridiculous. But at that moment, it felt like the only logical solution. Or just raging hormones.
So what happened? How did it all fall apart?
My mother's spies, of course. She had them everywhere. They intercepted our letters, and the whole plan was shut down before I'd even packed a bag.
I can only imagine your mom's reaction. I bet she wasn't pleased.
Pleased isn't the word. She went nuclear. She realized her little cage wasn't strong enough to hold me. So she decided I needed a bigger, more respectable one, and fast. Which is how I found myself, despite all my rebellion, being trotted out for the London marriage market.
So your mom's plan is to marry you off. But at one of these social balls, amidst all the polite chatter, you ran into someone unexpected who caught your own interest, right?
Yes, not in a marriageable way, of course. He was much older than me after all. But at an event where I was being presented to society, the scientist, Charles Babbage, was presenting his difference engine. Charles was brilliant, cantankerous, and utterly obsessed. He spoke of his engines as a father speaks of a difficult but favourite child. As for taking me seriously, my dear, I was a 17-year-old girl in a ballroom.
But you surprised him.
I did indeed. In his eyes, I was initially just another society debutante to be politely endured. I'm sure he expected me to ask if his machine could fetch me a glass of punch. His interest was only piqued when I started asking questions, not about the shiny brass, but about its mathematical soul. You could almost see the gears turning in his head, trying to process it. This young girl in a fancy dress was speaking his language. He was quite astonished.
And that's when he gave you the nickname, the Enchantress of Numbers.
He did. It was flattering, of course. But even then, do you see? A man is a genius. A woman is an enchantress. Something magical, otherworldly, not quite real. Still, I had found another mind that lived on the same landscape as mine. And that changed everything.
So you find this intellectual soulmate in Babbage, but your mother still has her own agenda for you, right? The marriage.
Of course. Her solution was to marry me off to a safe man, William King, soon to be the Earl of Lovelace.
But he wasn't just safe. He had this very strange obsession with your father, Lord Byron.
Obsession is putting it mildly. Here I was, this creature my mother had spent a lifetime trying to de-Byronize, and I marry a man who practically worships him. William named fields on his Surrey estate after my father's poems. He had Trust Byron inscribed on a beam in his house. And to top it all off, he had a portrait of himself painted in the same silly Albanian dress as my father wore in his portrait. My mother had successfully managed to marry me off to the president of the Lord Byron fan club.
That's unbelievably weird. So, you are now the Countess of Lovelace, living this public life, but a secret one too, while working with Babbage. It seemed like a dream partnership, but it didn't last. What happened?
First, I ended up translating a paper on Babbage's next idea, the analytical engine. I actually wrote to him and said, "That brain of mine is something more than merely mortal, as time will show." But I saw something in his machine that he never could.
And what was that?
Charles saw a machine that could follow a single, complex set of instructions. I saw a machine that could change its own mind. I realized you could create instructions for it to repeat a task, to loop back, to store a result and use it in a later step. You could create a process, not just a sum.
You essentially pioneered the concept of a software program.
I did. I described a method by which the engine could become a partner in creation, not just a tool. We could give it the basic rules, and it could then explore the consequences. That was the leap. It wasn't about math, it was about creation.
How did Babbage react to your discoveries?
He was bitter, especially about the publication of my notes to his paper on the analytical engine. This is where our visions had diverged. I saw the true potential of his engine, but he couldn't see past the numbers. When I offered to become its champion, to help him fundraise, he flatly rejected my help. That was the end of our collaboration.
What did you write in there that was so revolutionary?
I wrote the future. I explained how the machine could weave not just numbers, but any symbol, music or words. It could be a partner in creation.
Wow. So your greatest intellectual lifeline just collapses. And you're stuck in a marriage that you once called a quiet battlefield.
My brain was bored out of its skull. William, my husband, was sweet and kind, but he spoke more of horses than of hypotheses. I married a title and found myself in a drawing room longing for a laboratory. His interests were terrestrial, mine mathematical. One can only endure so many hunting stories before one's mind begins plotting algorithms in secret. So I filled the void with letters. I corresponded with some of the greatest minds of the age. Charles Dickens, the scientist Michael Faraday, people who could actually keep up.
So these were purely intellectual friendships.
Mostly. They saw me as a peer, an analyst. But then I met John Cross. A beautiful man. He was a scientist, yes, but he was different. He didn't just admire my mind. He understood the chaos in me, the poetry. Everyone else wanted to cage it or cure it. He wasn't afraid of it. That was the poetical science my mother so feared.
But you had a breakthrough. Tell me about it.
It was the loop. I described a method for the engine to repeat instructions, to store a result and use it later. It was no longer just a calculator doing a sum. It was a machine that could execute a process. I guess you could say I was describing what software does today.
And as I understand it, you wrote the first program yourself. For Bernoulli numbers, it was basically a letter to the future.
Yes, a letter from a 27-year-old woman in a world that wasn't remotely ready for it.
It's so interesting because you saw the future so clearly. But then how did your own life get so messy?
The real world, it seems, has too much chaos for a perfect equation. And John Cross, he didn't just understand my chaos. He introduced me to a new kind of it. The racetrack.
Oh, the gambling. He introduced you to betting?
He did. And in my desperation, I got this ridiculous idea. The project with Babbage was dead without money. John brought the thrill, and I thought I could bring the brains, invent a perfect mathematical system to beat the odds.
So it sounds like you thought you could use this system to fund the engine on your own terms.
Exactly. I had convinced myself that it was the only way. Plus, I guess I just wanted to see if I could pull it off.
What happened?
It was a catastrophe. I lost a fortune, about £3,000. Today, that would be about $400,000. But I was addicted. I stooped so low to pawn the family jewels to pay off my syndicate partners. Of course, my mother found out, and in her usual fury, she redeemed the jewels. But like any addict desperate for the next fix, I found other pawnbrokers and did it all over again.
Isn't this about the time when your health started to fail again?
Yes, I was in constant pain, ovarian cancer. I was relying on laudanum and opiates. It blurred the edges of everything. My failures, my pain, my life.
Wow, it must have been so hard. And wasn't your mother there at the end, still trying to control the narrative?
My mother, she saw my deathbed as her final chance to save my soul. She insisted I confess everything. It was an ordeal, and under the fog of pain and medicine, I gave her what she wanted. a confession about a lover. It satisfied her need for a tidy moral ledger.
But there was another confession, wasn't there? One you made only to your husband. I read that it horrified him so much he left your side. What did you say to him, Ada?
A woman must be allowed to keep one final secret, don't you think?
I get it. One last secret. But you made one thing very public. Your final request. To be buried next to the father you never knew. After everything. Why?
It was my final calculation. My final act of poetry. To declare to the world that I was, in the end, a child of both. The chaos and the code.
And then you pass away at 36. And for 100 years, you were forgotten.
History has never been kind to women who write in the margins.
But you were rediscovered. I mean, we name programming languages Ada in your honor. When you look at our world now, this world you dreamed of, what do you see?
I see ghosts of my work everywhere. When I wrote that the engine might one day compose music or create art, it was the purest fantasy. Now you call it artificial intelligence. When I created a method for the engine to repeat instructions, a way to handle a process beyond a single calculation, it was a theoretical exercise. Now, you simply call it software. You built my engine, a magnificent, terrifying, beautiful thing that connects you all. And now you must all decide what kind of poetry you will write with it.
These women changed history, yet their names were left in the shadows. We're bringing their voices back. Like and subscribe for more untold chapters.